Well, hello, and how are you, friends? Hey, this here is Shenandoah Briscoe coming to you from right here in St. Charles, Missouri, and welcome, my friends, to the Shen Show. All right, today is Friday, May the 1st, 2020. Got a happy birthday shout out going out to Sandra Branson. That's right, Sandra Branson from St. Charles. Well, don't know where she's living now, but she grew up in St. Charles, Missouri. I met her way back in the old Monroe School. That's right, Monroe Elementary School. And went further on with her throughout the Jefferson Junior High. Back when I was a kid, we had junior high schools. We didn't have middle schools. But then we went from, actually, you know what? It changed. That year that I went into high school, it changed that year. Because the year I went into high school, I went in as a freshman. So I was in the uh, ninth grade. And the eighth graders came up with. Actually, I went into the 10th grade. Yeah. I went into the 10th grade and the ninth graders came up with. And so there you go. Freshmen, sophomores, seniors, juniors. So I never got my freshman kick around about, because, well, hey, I got lucky. Anyway, hey, Karen Sanders poked me, so poke you back. I'm poking you back right now, Karen. Thank you, thank you, thank you, because I missed you guys. I missed my pokers. Nobody poked me for the last couple of days, so I was like, uh-oh, I'm afraid I have lost my poking friends, but no, we are back, we are back. All right, how about the local forecast for St. Charles viewing area? You know who it's brought to you by? None other than Wallace Resale. That's right, Wallace Resale on Facebook. You just go to the Wallace Resale website and Facebook page and take a peruse around their page and look at all the items that they've got for sale. I'm sure that there's a number there for you to take a look-see at, whichever your product number is, and put it over there in the messages, and they'll surely get back to you with the what-fors and the whereases. That's right, Wallace Resell. You'll be contacted by either Rick or Dawn. There you go. Today's weather forecast, it's 80 degrees outside and sunny bright. Boy, 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 I tell you. And the wind is only partial. So, that's a good thing. Now, let's see. It's going to start getting cloudy, though. And it's going to be partly cloudy overnight. Lows are going to be around 62 degrees Fahrenheit, and winds are going to be south at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Now, Saturday, May the 2nd, now that's going to be mostly sunny skies, with highs around 87 degrees Fahrenheit, and winds are going to be southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then they've got some scattered thunderstorms. Thunderstorms. Seeing how I'm missing all my teeth, I'm getting to where I can lisp. Shattered thunderstorms going to be coming in Saturday night with lows around 61 degrees Fahrenheit and winds northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Chances of rain 40%. Then Sunday, May the 3rd, cloudy with showers. Highs around 72 degrees Fahrenheit and winds northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Chances of rain 50%. And a few clouds overnight from time to time, with the temperature cast at around 53 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds are going to be east to northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. All right, and then Monday, May the 4th. That's right, May the 4th. Partly cloudy in the morning, increasing clouds with periods of showers late in the day. Highs around 70 degrees Fahrenheit and winds east at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Chances of rain 40%. And then showers early, then scattered thunderstorms developing later on at night. Lows around 52 degrees Fahrenheit and winds northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Chances of rain 50%. Then Tuesday, May 5th, variable clouds with scattered thunderstorms. Highs around 72 degrees Fahrenheit and winds north to northwest, that is, at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Chances of rain 40%. Then some clouds early will give way to generally clear conditions overnight. Lows around 51 degrees Fahrenheit and winds will be west to northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then finally, for your fifth day of our 5-day forecast, Wednesday, May the 6th. That's right, mostly sunny. That's right, except for a few afternoon clouds, mainly sunny day. Highs near 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and winds north to northwest, or actually just northwest, at 10 to 20 miles per hour. And then partly cloudy skies with lows around 49 degrees overnight. Winds are going to be west to northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And there you have your 5-day forecast for the St. Charles viewing area, brought to you by Wallace Resale on Facebook. All right then, ha 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 hee ha 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 ha. I've been stuck. I got a worm song in my head today. Been whistling it, been singing it. So anyway, that's two different songs. And that's what threw me off because I looked it up under one and it wasn't there. So I looked it up under another one. And the one that I was wanting to catch it under was, you've got to accentuate the positives, eliminate the negative, and latch on to the affirmative. Don't mess with Mr. In Between. You've got to spread the joy up to the maximum, bring gloom down to the minimum. Have faith and pandemonium are liable to walk upon the scene. Oh, have faith or pandemonium's liable to walk onto the scene. To illustrate my last remark, Jonah in the whale and Noah in the ark. What did they do just when everything looked so dark? Well, let me tell you, they accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, and latched onto the affirmative. Don't mess with Mr. Negative. Oh no, boo, boo, in between. Don't mess with Mr. In Between. Yeah, you got to spread up the joy of the maximum. Bring down the gloom to a minimum. Have faith, pandemonium, liable to walk in, or have faith or pandemonium is liable to walk onto the scene. Oh, here, let me gather around me, everybody, and gather around while I do some preaching. Let me find this here. Feel a sermon coming on. Yes, sir. The topic will be sin, and that is what I'm saying. If you want to hear my story, then settle right back just right there and sit tight while I start reviewing. The attitude of doing right. That's right. Okay, you've got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, and latch on to the affirmative. Don't mess with Mr. In Between. No, I said don't mess with Mr. In Between. You've got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, and latch on to the affirmative of life. You've got to spread joy up to the maximum, bring gloom down to a minimum. Have faith or pandemonium's liable to walk in upon the scene. To illustrate my last remark, Jonah was in the ark. Jonah was in a whale, and Noah was in the ark. What did they do just when everything looked so dark? Well, I'm going to tell you, friends, they accentuated the positives. They eliminated the negatives and latched on to the affirmatives. Don't mess with Mr. In Between. No, no, I said, don't mess with Mr. In Between. You got to spread joy up to the maximum, bring gloom down to the minimum. Have faith. Our pandemoniums are liable to walk onto the scene. You got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, and latch on to the affirmative. Don't mess with Mr. In Between. No, don't mess with Mr. In Between. I said, don't mess with In Between. All right, all right, all right. Now, the other song that was throwing me off because I was looking for it in this song over here, it's called Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities, oh Mother Nature's recipes that brings the bare necessities of life. Whenever I wander, wherever I roam, I couldn't be fonder of my big old home. The bees are buzzing in the trees to make some honey just for me. When you look under the rock in the plants and take a glance at the fancy ants, then maybe try a few, and the bare necessities of life will come to you. They'll come to you. Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Oh, forget about your trouble and your strife. I mean the bare necessities. That's why I care with a bear can rest at ease with just the bare necessities of life. Now, when you pick a pawpaw or a prickly pear, and you pick a raw paw, and you prick a raw paw, well, next time beware. Don't pick a prickly pear by the paw when the pick is a pear. When you pick a pear, you use a claw. Don't you need to use the claw when you pick a pear of the big pawpaw? Have I given you a clue? Well, the bare necessities of life will come to you. They'll come to you. Oh man, this is really living. Yep. So just try and relax. Yeah, cool it. Fall apart in my backyard. 'Cause let me tell you, you sometimes, little riches, if you act like the bears act, you'll work too hard. And don't spend your time looking around for something you want that can't be found. When you find out that you can live without it, and go ahead along not thinking about it, I'll tell you something true. Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities. That's why a bear can rest at ease with just the bare necessities of life. Yes, just the bare necessities of life. All right, sorry, had to do it. I love it, I love it, I love it. And don't you know? Don't you know? Don't you know you are a shooting star? Don't you know? Don't you know? Oh, oh. Let's see. There's another one that I was doing earlier today. It has to do with Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump and trying to get to heaven. You know, he knew he was going to heaven because he said, "Well, I'm going to heaven, Lieutenant Dan." And so there you know, he knew he was going. But seems how it's been a while since he'd been ready to being prepared to go to heaven. When he got up there, St. Peter's was at the gate, and he said, "Forrest." Forrest said, "I'm Forrest, Forrest Gump." He says, "Well, Forrest, I'm sorry to tell you that heaven's getting mighty crowded, and we're going to have to be taking a uh, IQ test." Forrest said, Uh, I am not a smart man. But that's okay, St. Peter said. You may be able to figure out these answers. I'll give you a whole day to think about it. So I'll give you the questions now, and you can think about the answers and come back tomorrow and give me the answers. And so Forrest went away and he came back and he got to the pearly gates and he went over to St. Peter and St. Peter says to him, he says, "Now, Forrest, I want you to tell me how many days in the month start with the letter T." And Forrest says, "Well, that was pretty hard, but I figured it out. It must be two." St. Peter said, "Two? Well, which two?" And he said, "Today and tomorrow." There you go. Well, that's not exactly what we were looking for us, but we weren't too technical on that, so I guess we're going to have to let that one slide. Now, what we do need to know, though, is a harder question. And so the answer to that question is, the question is, how many seconds are in a year? Now, if you figure 365 days in a month, in a year, and then you divide that by uh, hours, 24 hours in a day, you got some figuring to do. So Forrest, he says, "Well, I am not a bright man, but I did figure it out." And so St. Peter says, "You figured it out. What's the answer?" And Forrest said, "Well, there are 12." St. Peter said, 12? How did you figure that out? Forrest says, "Well, there is January 2nd, February 2nd, March the 2nd, April the." Okay, okay, I see where you're going. I see where you're going with that. Okay, you got that one right too. And so anyway, Forrest, what was uh, the last question is, what is God's name? What is God's first name? And Forrest said, "Well, that one was the easiest one of all. I knowed it right from the beginning because song lyrics, Andy. His name is Andy because the song tells me that it is." What? What? What song? Song lyrics tells me that it is his name. And he's like, "Song lyrics? What song?" "Andy walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own." Well, St. Peter couldn't do it. He had no iota what he could do left. There was just nothing he could do. And so what he done was he opened up them pearly gates and he said, "Run, Forrest, run." And he started running. And when he quit running, he was all the way into heaven. "I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. And he speaks with me, and the sound of his voice is so sweet. The birds hush their singing, and the melody that he gives to me within my heart is ringing. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there. No other has ever known. Stay in the garden with me. I stay in the garden with him. Through the night around me is falling, but he bids me go. Though through the voice of woe, his voice to me is calling. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, no other has ever known. All right. Well, it's been on my mind all day long. Did I was going to read Gemma, but that was a long, long book. Looks like it's story time for the kids. So come on around, pop your chair, set your hiney down. It's story time. All right, all right, all right. Story time for the kids. How about the Guardians of Love? The Guardians of Love. Do-do-do-dee-dum. Do-do-do-dee-doo. Do-do-do-doo. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Okay, the Guardians of Lord. Boy meets frog. I was sitting in class the first time that I saw the frog. Miss Weaver had been my teacher for a few months. Oh, no, 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 no. No, we cannot do this. This is, It's another real, real long one like that last one. Sorry, can't do that one. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So sorry. I'm sorry. Why the crickets chirp? Let's see if that's a short but. Yeah, it looks kind of short. Why the crickets chirp? Before there were seasons, the crickets could fly. He flew faster than the bumblebee. He flew higher than the falcon, and he flew fancier than the flying markaduck, who was quite a fancy flyer. The cricket had flown all over the world. He flew to the east, and then he flew to the west, and then he flew to the south, but he had never flown north. The ant tried to warn him that he should not try. So it's very cold up north, said the ant. Too cold for an ant and too cold for a cricket. The cricket, however, did not listen, because crickets do whatever they want, and he set off to the north, and that very night. It did not take him long to get there because, well, he was such a fantastically fast and fancy flyer. The cricket landed next to pine tree. That's what kind of tree it was, pine, really. The cricket landed right next to a pine tree at the as the sun began setting. The cricket was There was snow everywhere he looked. There was snow on the tree. There was snow on the ground, and there was snow on top of the mountains. The, the moose came walking over to him very slowly. Hello, said the moose. Bundling up, nighttime is coming. The cricket did not listen, because crickets do whatever they want. He flew up into a pine tree and to settle in for a good nap. He did this quickly because he is such an incredibly fast and fancy flyer. The owl came flying over to the same branch. You should find some shelter for the cold night, said the owl. But The cricket did not listen because crickets do whatever they want. He decided to rest on a pile of twigs. He was sleepier than he had ever been from all that remarkably fast and fancy flying. The cricket slept all through the night until morning. When he awoke up, he was ready to go home and tell the ant about his trip. He hopped high in the air to start flying, but he could not. Instead, he fell right back down into the snow. He hopped again, even higher this time, but his wings would not work. They had frozen solid during the cold night. He tried to warm them up by rubbing them together, but it was of no use. The cricket had to hop all the way home. It took him days and days to return. By the time he got back, his wings had almost become unfrozen. When he rubbed them together, this time, though, they made a chirping noise. Ah. Mm. Can't do it with no teeth. When he rubbed them together, they made a chirping noise that no one in the forest had ever heard before. And every time he rubbed his wings together, they chirped a little bit louder and got a little less frozen. But it is important to know, dear reader, that the wings are special and fragile things. This is why the greatest care should always be taken around them. They are not meant to be frozen, and once they are, they may never be the same again. Even though the cricket's wings were no longer frozen, he still could not fly, and ever since then the cricket stays on the ground like his friends the ant, and hops from place to place, and now the cricket is the fastest and fanciest hopper there is. At nighttime you can hear him chirping from rubbing his wings together to keep warm. But he is doing much more than just that. The cricket is telling you how warm or cold it is by chirping. He chirps faster when it is warm and slower when it is cold. This way you will not make the same mistake that he did. However, that is only if you decide to listen. Well, looky there, there was a moral in that one. That was a moral in the story. Curious George. Hey, I wonder if that's in here, Curious George. I wonder, the story, Curious George. Hmm. We'll see if we can look it up and read it. Curious George, Curious George, Curious George. I wanted to look it up and read it. It's all about George. George, 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 the monkey named George. Do, do, do. Do, 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 do. Kids book read aloud by George. All right. It's Ani, and she's going to be reading. Yeah, we're going to be reading Curious George. It's an A.H.A. Roy. Okay, here we go. Owen's House. Curious George by H.A. Ray. This is George. He lived in Africa Wait a minute. This is George. He lived in Africa. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. Well, one day George saw a man in a big yellow hat. Well, then the man saw George also. What a nice little monkey, he thought to himself. I would like to take him home with me. So he threw his hat on the ground. And of course, George, being so curious, came down from the tree to look at the curious looking yellow hat. And the hat had been on the man's head. So George decided it should go on his own head. Well, he placed the hat on his head, and when he did, it was too big, and the hat covered his whole head. And so, as the hat covered his eyes, the man grabbed the little monkey and put him in a sack. And he brought George, mm, and he brought George, the man with the big yellow hat. He got into a little boat, and they rowed them both across the water to a big ship. And that George said, "But we still sail." What? George was sad, but he was still a little curious. On the big ship, things began to happen. The man took off the big hat, and George sat on a little stool, and the man said, "George, I am going to take you to a big zoo in the big city. You will like it there. Now run along and play, but don't get into any trouble." And George promised to be good, but it is easy for little monkeys to forget. Uh, Sorry about all these muscle spasms. So, now that he has forgotten, where am I at? On the deck, he found some seagulls. He wondered how they could fly. And so, he was so curious, he stepped up on the rails and he started flapping his arms because he had to try. It looked really easy, and so he reached out his arms and stretched and jumped out off the boat. But he fell off the boat and into the water. And then somebody said, "Where is George?" And the sailors looked and looked, and then somebody finally found him in the water struggling. But they found him, and they said, "Man overboard!" And the sailors cried out. And then they got a hold of George, lugged him back into the boat. And then, after that, George was more careful to be a good monkey, until at last the long trip was over. George said goodbye to the kind sailors, and he sorry about that. Curious George said goodbye to the kind sailors, and he and the man with the big yellow hat walked off the ship on the shore and into the city to the man's house. After a good meal, George felt very tired, and so the man gave him some pajamas of his own. They were much too big and they looked kind of ridiculous, but that's okay. He crawled into bed and fell asleep at once. The next morning, the man telephoned the zoo. George watched him, and he was fascinated by the telephone. Then the man went away. George was curious, so he went to the telephone and he started dialing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What fun he was having! But what a horrible thing! He had telephoned the fire stations, and the firemen rushed to the phone to answer it. They said, "Hello, hello," but there was no answer because George couldn't speak. So they looked at the big map, and they looked for the signal on the big map for the phone where it came from. They had no idea it was George, but they thought it was a real fire. And well, hurry, 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 they said, and they jumped onto the fire engine, and they jumped onto the hook and ladder uh, truck too. Ding, 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 everyone out of the way. Hurry, 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 they yelled as they went along. No fire when they got to the house. Only a naughty monkey is what they found. Oh, catch him, they cried. George tried to run away, but he almost got away, but then he got caught in the telephone wire. And, well, one thick fireman and one thin one caught him, and they drug him away and said, "You fooled the fire department." So they are going to take him and put him in jail. So Curious George was sitting in prison on a bench. He had no idea what he'd been doing on the phone. George really wanted to get out, so he climbed up to the window to try the bars. And then just then the watchman came in and he got onto the wooden bench to get a hold of George. But when he stepped up onto the bench, it flipped over and George ran out of the window. And then went, when he fell down to the floor, George jumped off of the window and ran out the door and out through the whole building and onto the roof. And then quickly, lickety split, he was a monkey again, a free monkey. And he walked on the telephone wires and quickly over the guards' heads. And then he walked away, free, free as free could be. And now he worked his way back to the man's house. He was a little lost, but he was looking for the man. Down in the street, outside the prison wall, stood a man with balloons. A little girl bought a balloon for her brother. George watched. He was curious again. He felt that he must have a bright red balloon. He reached over and tried to help himself, but the balloon man, and so as he tried to help himself to a balloon, it turned out he got all the balloons. And so the whole bunch of balloons broke loose in an instant, and the wind whisked them all away. And with them went George, holding tight with both hands. And after that, up, up he sailed, higher and higher, curiously looking around like, and all of everything looked like the same houses, toy houses, because they were so small. And the people looked like dolls. And George was frightened. Hold on very tight. He kept saying to himself. And so now, at First, the wind blew in great gusts, and then it quieted. Finally, it stopped blowing altogether, and George was very tired. Down, down, down he went, and bump, right on the top of a traffic light. Everyone was surprised, and the traffic light got all mixed up. George didn't know what to do, and then he heard someone call, "George!" He looked down and saw his friend, the man with the big yellow hat. And so George was very happy. The man was happy too. And George slid down the post. And the man with the big yellow hat put him under his arm. Then he paid the balloon man for all the balloons. And then George and the man climbed into his car. And at last they went away. And away they went. They went to the zoo. What a nice place to live. What a nice place to live for George. So there you go. Sorry, that was so kind of confusing and mixed up, but that's the way it is. Sometimes it just is. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, it's time for our portion of the program called Our Daily Bread. And our daily bread. I was going to say, what's going on here? Blue screen. I had blue screens looking at me. Don't know why it was blue everywhere I'd see. But I thought to myself, what could it be? Yes, I thought to myself, what could it be? Living in the branches. That is today's devotion. And the scriptures for today will be Ephesians 4:14 through 24. Now, I'd like to remind you that if you do watch the Bible with Briscoe, which I highly recommend because that messenger is quite a man. Anyway, if you do watch the Bible with Briscoe 2020, um, oh, today they're going to be covering 1 Kings 10 through 11 and Luke 21:20 through 38. Alrighty then. Here we go. Ephesians 4:14 through 24. Then he will no longer be infants. Then we, then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves, and blown here and there by every wind of teaching, and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become and very respected and the mature body of Him who is the head, and Him who is the head, that is Christ. From Him, the whole body, joined and held together by everything supporting a ligament, grouse, and bolts of itself in love, as each part does its work. So I tell you this: instance on the ins. So I tell you this, and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that they them due to the hardening of their hearts, having lost all sensitivity. They have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. That, however, is not the way of life the life you learned when you heard about Christ and were taught in Him in accordance with the truth that is Jesus. You were taught, with regard to your former way of life, to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. And so there you have it. And that there is Ephesians 4:14 through 24, which concludes the daily bread portion of the program, which also concludes our program, the Shen Show for the day. And so therefore I've got one more song for you, and that would be, well, goodbye, my friends. It's a time to go. Ba-da-da-da-dum. I said goodbye, my friends. It's time to go. Ba-da-da-da-dum. Oh, goodbye, my friends. It's time to go. I hate to leave you, but I really must go. So goodbye, my friends, goodbye. This here has been Shenandoah Briscoe saying hello and how are you? Thanks for tuning in to the Shen Show. And as always, you know God loves you and so do I. So come back and see me tomorrow because, well, hey, I'll be here and I hope that you are too.